Chosen one, pause for a moment. I have an important and urgent message to share, and this message is not for everyone. If you are not walking the divine path of God, if your heart is closed to truth, you should not continue watching. But if you are a true follower of God, if you have felt the calling on your life, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be. This message reached you at the perfect time, not by accident, but by divine alignment. God allowed this message to find you because you are ready for it now. Jesus taught the chosen ones to see beyond appearances, to perceive what hides in plain sight. What you call discernment today is something he trained you to use with your spiritual eyes and your mind. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will bring clarity, calm your mind, and restore your authority in ways you didn't even realize you had lost. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon, and share this message with other chosen ones who need this truth. And comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned with your divine mission and ready to receive what God is revealing now. Who the chosen ones really are in the eyes of Jesus. Chosen one, let me speak to you plainly now. Not emotionally, not dramatically, but truthfully, the way a teacher speaks when he knows the student is finally ready to understand. Being chosen was never about feeling special. It was never about being superior. Jesus never chose people to inflate their ego. He chose them because they could carry weight without breaking. When Jesus looked at people, he didn't see what the world sees. He didn't see status, titles, or appearances. He saw capacity. He saw who could hold truth without twisting it, who could walk with awareness without becoming arrogant, who could suffer without becoming bitter. That is who the chosen ones are. If you are chosen, you have always felt different. Even as a child, you sensed things others ignored. You questioned what others accepted. You felt deeply, thought deeply, and carried emotions you couldn't explain. You often felt older than your age. That wasn't imagination. That was spiritual sensitivity forming early. Jesus did not explain everything to everyone. He spoke in parables for a reason. When the disciples asked him why, he made it clear. Some people hear words, but they do not perceive truth. Some see actions, but they do not understand meaning. But to the chosen, he explained things privately. Not because others were inferior, but because others were not ready. And here is something you need to hear clearly. Being chosen does not make life easier. It makes it more precise. Every mistake feels heavier. Every distraction drains you faster. Every lie feels louder in your spirit. That is because you are built for alignment, not chaos. When you are out of alignment, your soul protests. Many chosen ones grow up feeling isolated. Even when surrounded by people, they feel unseen. You may have been labeled quiet, intense, emotional, or strange. Some of you were misunderstood in church, misunderstood in family, misunderstood by friends. That misunderstanding was not punishment. It was protection. God was teaching you early not to rely on external validation. Jesus often withdrew from crowds, not because he hated people, but because clarity requires stillness. Chosen ones need solitude more than others. Not isolation, but intentional withdrawal. This is where many of you feel confused. You think something is wrong because you need space. But Jesus himself needed it. Solitude is not weakness, it is calibration. Let me say this with authority. If noise drains you, if shallow conversations exhaust you, if false smiles disturb your peace, that is not arrogance. That is discernment developing. You are not built to live on the surface. You are built to operate from depth. Chosen ones carry an internal moral compass that cannot be silenced. You cannot pretend for long. You cannot live a double life without consequences. Your conscience speaks loudly. When you ignore it, your mind becomes restless. Sleep becomes difficult. Peace feels distant. That is not anxiety. That is your spirit calling you back to truth. Jesus trusted the chosen with responsibility. He sent them out, He corrected them openly. He expected growth from them. He did not lower the standard to make them comfortable. If you are chosen, God holds you to a higher level of accountability. That is why excuses never satisfy you. Deep down, you know when you are capable of more. You may have noticed that you attract both admiration and resistance. Some people feel drawn to you without knowing why. Others feel uncomfortable around you for no clear reason. This is not about personality. It is about presence. Light does not argue with darkness. It simply reveals it, and revelation makes some people uneasy. Chosen ones are not meant to dominate others. They are meant to stabilize environments. When you walk into a room, things shift subtly. Conversations change. Tension either rises or settles. You may not even speak, yet people react. That is influence, not performance. Jesus taught the chosen to lead through example, not force. He taught authority without aggression, calm without passivity, strength without noise. If you have ever felt frustrated watching loud, shallow voices receive attention while depth goes unnoticed, understand this. God does not measure impact by volume. He measures it by transformation. You were never meant to convince everyone. You are meant to be recognized by those who can see. Chosen ones find each other through resonance, not explanation. When truth speaks, the prepared heart responds. Many of you have gone through periods of intense mental pressure, overthinking, questioning your purpose, feeling like you are behind in life. Let me correct that thought gently but firmly. You are not behind. You are being prepared. While others rush into roles they cannot sustain, you are being shaped internally. Jesus spent 30 years preparing and 3 years demonstrating. The world sees delay. God sees foundation. Chosen ones are built from the inside out. You may also carry compassion that feels heavy. You feel other people's emotions. You sense when something is wrong even before words are spoken. This is not weakness, it is responsibility. But hear this carefully. Compassion without boundaries leads to exhaustion. Even Jesus withdrew from those who refused truth. Being chosen does not mean saving everyone. It means staying obedient. You are not responsible for outcomes. You are responsible for alignment. Let me bring calm to your mind now. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to rush. You do not need to fight for visibility. When the time is right, your clarity will speak louder than effort ever could. Jesus did not chase recognition. Recognition followed obedience. So if you have felt tired, misunderstood, or pressured lately, breathe. You are not failing. You are being refined. What feels like heaviness is often depth expanding. What feels like silence is often instruction. You are chosen not because you are perfect, but because you are teachable. Not because you are fearless, but because you are willing to walk forward even when fear is present. And most importantly, not because you seek power, but because you can be trusted with truth. Hold that identity gently but firmly. Let it settle your thoughts. Let it calm your nervous system. You are exactly where you need to be. And what comes next will make even more sense. What archons are and why most people cannot see them. Chosen one, now we move into territory that requires calm, not fear. Awareness, not imagination. I want you relaxed as you listen to this, because tension clouds perception. Jesus never taught his followers to panic about darkness. He taught them to understand it. Archons are not what movies portray. They are not monsters chasing people in the night. They are systems of influence. They operate through thought patterns, emotional manipulation, false beliefs, and distorted perceptions. Their power is not physical. It is psychological and spiritual, and that is why most people never see them. An archon does not announce itself. It whispers. It blends in. It hides behind habits, social norms, unchallenged traditions, and internal narratives that keep people distracted from truth. Archons thrive where awareness is absent. They gain influence where consciousness sleeps. Most people are constantly stimulated. Noise, screens, opinions, fear-based news, endless comparison. When the mind is overstimulated, it cannot observe itself. And when a person cannot observe their own thoughts, they become easily guided by forces they do not recognize. This is why Jesus repeatedly spoke about watching, staying awake, being sober-minded. He was not speaking about physical sleep. He was speaking about mental and spiritual awareness. Archons influence through repetition. A lie repeated long enough begins to feel like truth. A fear entertained long enough becomes identity. A limitation accepted long enough becomes belief. And once belief is formed, behavior follows naturally, without resistance. Now, listen carefully. This does not mean every negative thought is an archon. That kind of thinking leads to paranoia, not wisdom. Jesus never encouraged obsession. He encouraged clarity. The chosen ones are not meant to see enemies everywhere. They are meant to recognize patterns calmly. Most people cannot see archonic influence because they are emotionally attached to their own thinking. They believe every thought they have is their own. They defend their emotional reactions. They justify their triggers. And anything that challenges their inner narrative feels like an attack. Chosen ones are different. You have the ability to step back from your thoughts. You question why you feel the way you feel. You sense when something is off, even if you can't explain it yet. That pause, that moment of internal observation, is where perception begins. Archons do not control through force. They control through agreement. The moment a person agrees with fear, shame, or hopelessness, influence is established. This is why Jesus emphasized truth. Truth breaks agreement, not arguments, not resistance. Truth. Many of you have noticed patterns in your life where confusion appears right before growth. Doubt intensifies right before clarity. Distractions multiply right before breakthrough. That is not coincidence. That is influence attempting to delay alignment. But here is the good news. Archons are limited. They cannot create. They can only distort. They cannot touch what is consciously observed. Awareness collapses their influence. That is why chosen ones are targeted mentally, not physically. Most people live reactively. Something happens, they react emotionally. Someone speaks. They absorb it without filter. A thought appears. They identify with it instantly. There is no pause, no observation, no discernment. Chosen ones are being trained to pause. Jesus modeled this constantly. When confronted, he did not react impulsively. When accused, he responded with clarity or silence. When tempted, he recognized the pattern immediately. He did not negotiate with distortion. Let me say something that may settle your mind. If you are becoming more aware, you may temporarily feel more mental pressure. That does not mean darkness is winning. It means your perception is sharpening. When the eyes adjust to light, there is discomfort before clarity. Archons lose influence when exposed. They rely on unconsciousness. That is why they prefer busy minds and emotionally reactive people. Stillness is their weakness. Clarity is their undoing. Many chosen ones experience moments where they suddenly see through a situation, a person, or even a belief they once held. And when that happens, there is no anger, just understanding. That is spiritual sight activating. You are not meant to fight archons. You are meant to outgrow them. A mature mind is inaccessible to manipulation. A grounded spirit cannot be rushed. A person who knows who they are cannot be easily redirected. This is why Jesus emphasized foundation. Build on rock, not sand. Rock is truth. Sand is emotional impulse. Archons thrive in instability. They starve in consistency. Let me bring this into a therapeutic truth for you. If you have felt mentally exhausted in the past, it may not be because you are weak. It may be because you are carrying awareness in environments that discouraged it. Being awake in a sleeping world is tiring, but rest does not come from ignorance. It comes from alignment. You are learning not just to see, but to remain calm while seeing. That is the mark of maturity. That is why most people cannot perceive these influences. They are too emotionally entangled to observe clearly. Chosen ones are not superior. They are responsible. Responsibility requires awareness. Awareness requires discipline, and discipline requires patience. So breathe. You are not under attack. You are becoming clearer. And clarity is the beginning of authority. What Jesus taught you was not fear of darkness, but mastery of perception. And once you see clearly, influence loses its grip naturally. Now that you understand what archons are and why most people cannot see them, the next step is even more important: how Jesus trained perception itself. And that will bring even more peace to your mind. Jesus' hidden teachings on spiritual perception. Chosen one, this is where many people misunderstand Jesus. They read his words quickly, devotionally, emotionally, but not perceptively. Jesus was not only a savior, he was a master teacher of awareness, and he knew exactly who was ready to hear what. When Jesus said, "He who has eyes to see, let him see," he was not speaking poetically, he was speaking diagnostically. He was identifying a capacity that exists in some and remains dormant in others. Spiritual perception is not imagination, it is trained clarity. Jesus constantly separated seeing from believing. Many believed emotionally, few perceived deeply. Crowds followed him for miracles. Chosen ones stayed for understanding. He taught in layers. The surface layer was moral, the deeper layer was perceptual. Parables were not meant to confuse, they were meant to filter. Only those willing to reflect, question, and sit with meaning could access the deeper truth. This is important for your peace. Jesus never forced perception. He invited it. He allowed people to remain blind if they chose comfort over truth. Awareness cannot be forced. It must be chosen. One of the greatest misconceptions is that spiritual sight means seeing supernatural visuals. That is not what Jesus emphasized. He emphasized discernment, the ability to recognize truth in real time, to see intention behind words, to sense alignment or distortion beneath behavior. Notice how Jesus responded to situations. He did not react emotionally. He perceived motive. When religious leaders spoke, he heard fear. When crowds demanded signs, he saw dependency. When disciples argued, he identified pride, not offense. That level of perception does not come from emotion. It comes from stillness. Jesus often withdrew to pray, not to escape people, but to recalibrate perception. Prayer, as Jesus practiced it, was alignment. It was grounding. It was returning the mind to truth. Let me say this clearly. Spiritual perception is calm. If something produces panic, confusion, or obsession, it is not from God. Jesus never activated fear to teach truth. Even when confronting darkness, he was composed. Chosen ones sometimes mistake emotional intensity for spiritual depth. They think feeling overwhelmed means something profound is happening. But Jesus taught that peace is the indicator of alignment. Truth settles the mind. Lies agitate it. This is where archonic influence tries to interfere, by making people equate anxiety with awareness. But awareness brings clarity, not chaos. Jesus trained perception through questions. Who do you say that I am? He wasn't asking for information. He was revealing perception. Some answered from rumor. Others answered from recognition. Perception is recognition without explanation. You have experienced this. Moments where you just know. No evidence. No logic chain. Just clarity. That is not guessing. That is perception functioning properly. But perception must be protected. This is why Jesus warned about distractions, hypocrisy, and double-mindedness. A divided mind cannot see clearly. When you live to please others, perception weakens. When you fear rejection, discernment dulls. Jesus also taught timing. He did not reveal everything at once. He said, "You cannot bear it now." That is important. Just because you are chosen does not mean you are meant to see everything immediately. Maturity includes restraint. Some of you feel frustrated because you sense more than you can articulate. You feel truths forming but not yet fully defined. That is not failure. That is incubation. Jesus modeled silence as perception. Sometimes the most accurate response is no response. Silence is not avoidance. It is mastery. Archons rely on reaction. They provoke. They rush. They demand immediate emotional response. Jesus never allowed his awareness to be hijacked by urgency. When tempted in the wilderness, he did not panic. He did not debate. He identified distortion and responded with truth, calmly, precisely. Let this bring therapy to your mind. You do not need to respond to everything you perceive. Seeing does not require